Hello, I'm Roger Reaves. I was a former drug pilot and sea captain carrying drugs, and I made untold millions importing drugs into the United States and other countries too. This is how crime works. I hauled over 100 loads of marijuana from Mexico and Central America into California. I did 20-ton loads of hashish out of Pakistan and 20-ton loads of Thai weed out of Thailand. And I was rewarded for that with 33 years in prison. If I had a chance to do my life over again, definitely would not do this. You wouldn't do it if you knew what was going to happen to you. I went on to start to work with the Medellin Cartel with Pablo Escobar, Jorge Ochoa. I went on down to Colombia to find some work, and I met up with Mr. Robert Davila, a lawyer from Bogota, and he introduced me to some people in Jorge Ochoa. And I liked Jorge, a nice looking young man, spoke a little English and spoke a lot of English. And so he asked me what kind of airplanes I had and what kind of experience I had flying across the border. So I told you I had a DC-3, a Beech 18, a turbojet Aero Commander. And so he was impressed. He said, well, we got all the work that you can do at $5,000 a kilo. Wow. How many kilos you put on there? He said, oh, 300, 500. Well, that's $1.5 or $2.5 million for an 8-hour trip. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go to work. So he called his partner in, Pablo Escobar. He was just a nice man. He shook hands and asked me the same thing that Ochoa had asked me, and I told him what I had. He said, well, we got all the work you can ever do. We got tons of it stacked up here and need moving. I went back and got my airplane and started hauling. So after I believe I some loads, I had a $7 million, and I thought, wow, that did pretty good. That was just like in a few weeks. It was so easy. You just say Thursday, and then there was a radio station there at El Paco, is the forks of the Magdalena River, and inland from Cartagena. And I'd fly there, and I'd be at 10,000 feet coming in, and they would have a smaller plane at 5,000 feet circling. Sometimes we'd be able to find it. Then I'd fall in beside it, and then so we'd go some 200 miles, maybe another hour until land at some jungle strip. So I didn't have to know. Nobody had to know where we were going, what we were doing. You know, I'd land there. Sometimes I'd leave one motor running and open the air stair door, and there'd be a line of men with like a bucket brigade, and one of them was in there, and he'd stack the cocaine came always in duffel bags, like the military duffel bag had a lock on it, and they had oh, three X's or a rattlesnake or something just like their friends or their cattle. Some went to New York, some went to Chicago, Seattle, and it just went all over the United States after we got it to Miami. In Colombia, they kept moving the labs, the drug labs, the cocaine labs, further and further down into the Amazon till it was stretching our gasoline. Like, wow, a little bit of headwind, we might not make it. So I complained to the jefes of Pablo Escobar and George Ochoa, and the runways got longer. I landed there one time, and so Pablo Escobar landed in a brand new helicopter right side of me, and he came over and we shook hands, and he had a pilot there named Benjamin Ben, and he put him in. He said he's going to show you something. So we flew north. I didn't know where we was going, and so we went to Nicaragua to a military base and landed there. He introduced me to the general or whatever it was of the people, and it was in charge of it. Says land here and stay as long as you want to, all day, night, week, whatever you need. Repairs, they'll wash your airplane, fill it up fuel, and be on your way. So that started that, and they paid for all that. DEA didn't even have any idea that anybody be come from South America, come across the Gulf of Mexico, 700 miles, drop down. I would slow down, and they had sometime, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 helicopters coming in from the oil wells off the coast of Louisiana. I just slowed down and came in with them. They just had no idea that we were bringing tons of cocaine. So that's when I was dead up coming in north, and the whole world was fogged in. It just come in quickly, and I didn't have anywhere to go to. So I came down the glide slope blind into New Orleans International Airport with a load of cocaine. Sit there all night long in that fog. And I was afraid to little car somebody come around and find me. The next morning, about 8 o'clock, I couldn't stand it anymore. I could see the sun coming through. So I cranked it up and took off. I still had a mile. I was about halfway down the runway. And I went across Lake Pontchartrain to St. Timothy Aviation. That was where I was going to. And I could see it broken down there. So I just pulled the power and went almost straight down and landed. And it had scared me. Scared, yes. I was afraid for my life. I thought I might die that night. And I told her, I'm hanging it up. So I told the fellas in Miami, this is my last. I'm through with it. Oh, Roger, please, please. Well, that was how they was making a living, the Colombians that was up there. Don't you know anybody that will fly? And so I said, maybe. So I asked Barry Seidel. I had met him. Barry Seal was a employee of mine. I took my wife and children down to Honduras. I was looking for a ranch that had a runway on it. We could buy, refuel all the way and keep my airplane there in a hangar. We got flights back to New Orleans. It was a nice looking man sitting beside the window. And I looked at him and I said, he looked princely. He looked different. He looked like sharp. Then they got a little bit further. They had a little click, click. I said, he just switched on his autopilot. The guy in Reno said, you fly these too? Yes, sir. I got a few hours. My name Barry Seal. How you do? Gave him my address and phone number. I said, come out to Santa Barbara, Barry. I may have some work for you. We went flying and without Aero Commander and a hot airplane. He got in it like it was his everyday forward that he was flying. Click, 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 click. Zoom, we took off. And I said, show me your stuff. Well, he wrung me out like Bob Hoover, the national champion. But I said, whoa, whoa, that's enough. And he cut the engine until we went flying this way sideways. And we came in called the falling leaf until we landed. Stopped that plane right on it. I paid him $1 million a trip. He became my friend. I really liked Perry. He told. He turned evidence, which I don't blame him. He had certain people, strong man in Mena, Arkansas behind him in the CIA. And when they let him hold in the bag, he was facing life prison. He just cried and said, Roger, I can't do it. Me learning to fly was so ironic. I learned to fly, and as I was learning to fly, I thought that I would be a missionary aviation fellowship pilot. I was working in the fire department in Los Angeles in Redondo Beach, and we worked every other day, and then we had 3 days, and we had 4 days off. Well, my little airplane, I fly down to Mexico and Mario and the children. So I started in the antique business, and it was really, really nice. I was the very first pickers out there. And me and this fellow would go back to Missouri, where he was from. And so I'd buy them, and he had his other firemen that would buy them for me, and I'd go back and we'd run a big truck and bring them back. And you ought to go down and get you a load of marijuana. He said, that stuff's hotter than pancakes or whatever. And so he introduced me to a fella, and he introduced me to a man, a really nice fella. He said, well, you might do it. I said, I don't know what you're going to pay. He said, pay you $10,000. I said, throw some of that hay in there. So I brought it home. There was nothing to it. Absolutely just nothing. I give it to them. They give me $10,000 in a paper bag, and I took it home and shook it on the bed. Marty put her hand over her mouth, and the baby grabbed $100 bill and was crawling away, and it was just really fun. So I went to see a lawyer that was a criminal lawyer that took care of cases like that. And I said, Mr. Lawyer, here's $100. What would happen if I got caught bringing marijuana back from Mexico in my airplane? He said, what's your criminal history? I said, I don't have one. I've never had a speeding ticket. I've never had a parking ticket. He said, you work on the fire department there in Redondo Beach? I said, yes, sir. He said, for sure you will get probation. And at the worst you get 1 year, spend 4 months raking leaves, some military base. And I thought, boy, I have found my profession. So I went and bought a bigger airplane. I bought one that would carry, I could make $40,000 a day. So I invited my mother and baby sister to come out from Georgia, and I took them to Disneyland in my new Cadillac, like I was showing off. And so she said, what are you doing, boy? I said, I'm hauling pot. And she said, how much you making? I said, I'm making $40,000 any day I want to go down there. And I told her what the lawyer said, and I said, "What do you think, Mom?" She said, "Do you need a co-pilot, son?" And that's how it was in 1973. I'll tell you about how I escaped 1974, somewhere along there, yes. I was over in Baja, California and got locked up. I'd knocked an immigration officer down. And so, oh boy, I was in trouble. Two little girls and my wife. We sat at a little table in a restaurant, and the guy came up with some shoes under his arm and wanted to know what we were doing there. Papers. He was really rude, and he was looking at my wife very rudely. He didn't tell me who he was or nothing. He just said, "I'm chief of the immigration." So we got out the street, and I hit him on his listener, and he went down. A few hours later, here come the Marines with their M16s and bayonets, and they arrested me on the boat and put me into little jail. So some children came up, and I had candy and Coca-Colas in the cell, and I passed it through the bars, and they handed me rocks. And I pulled the door out and banged it till my hands were bloody, and I got the door pulled down enough I could get out, and I kicked the front door off of that jailhouse and went through town and got on my sailboat and got away for a while. They got me the next spot down. And the second one, I was arrested in Mexico, and I was tortured almost to death in that prison, in a cell there in Mazatlan prison. It was filthy. I mean, filthy. There was one bucket in the back for all about 20 men to use, and it run over. And in the morning, sitting on that hard ground, on that hard machine, that floor was miserable. Then they took me down the back, and it was in a torture place. It was, I was in a room about 5 feet square. You had to go angles to lay on the floor. And they take me out and beat me up. And finally, they put my head under water, gaseous water. And I mean, if you take a whiff of that, you will explode. So they beat me from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head. And I don't know how long I was back there. You couldn't tell day or night. It had a light in there. It was really hot. I think it was July. And there was a little spot, maybe that much. I put my head face under that door and would suck fresh air. And I went to sleep. And when I did, I had the most vivid visions or dreams. The animals and pink flying fish, they were just with their wings on flying all over. I know where Disney got his. He was on formaldehyde. So I passed out, and the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital with a doctor over me telling me to breathe. And my wife got some money to somebody, and by 3 o'clock in the morning, I was laying on the cement floor, and they shook me awake and took me through a little tiny back door of the prison and put me in a pickup truck and swept me away. So that it was an escape, but it was paid to get out. I hauled over 100 loads within my airplane from Mexico and Central America into the United States. So I was hauling marijuana out of a place called Pichilingue, and just about 50 miles north of Mazatlan. It was a poor, poverty little village and starving donkeys, and had a little tiny short runway there, 900 feet long. It took all I could do to get off empty. I had a Cessna 207 large one. So just as I cranked the engine up, pow, I thought I blew a tire out. I was looking. And Pedro was punching me saying, "Policia, policia, policia." And it dawned on me, uh-oh. And I just pushed the throttle to the firewall, and I went tearing off down that little dusty strip, only about 400 feet in front of me. And when I got right to the end of it, they just, it was on both sides of the runway. They just riddled that airplane with bullets. Later on, they counted 80 bullet holes that went in there. And here I am sitting in a seat right up on top of nothing. And we jumped out, and there was 4 federales coming down that runway running. And they were still shooting. And a couple of bullets hit the airplane, bang, bang, real loud. Pedro and I started running up the hill through the cactus. There was an old white donkey. She must have been 30 years old, a big donkey. We jump on that donkey and get away. And we go about, I understand later on, 7 miles, and we found a man, and he was plowing a mule and a little cow. Pedro, of course, knew him, and they talked a little bit. And the man put us in his house with his wife and a daughter. And about night, the man came back with a really nice young man that spoke English. He said, "I'm Dr. Benjamin So-So with the Red Cross, and I'm from," but he gave us pain pills and tetanus shots and bandaged Pedro up pretty good. And he said, he has got to get to hospital. He'll die with this. And he said, with you, they're looking for an American pilot that's maybe dead or shot. The plane was just full of blood. And I must have bathed 20 times to get the blood and the dirt and the grub off of me. They called for a taxi, and they propped me up with pillows and blankets in the back seat of that car. And it was going to Guadalajara. I guess it's 8 or 10 hours. I don't remember. I got on the plane in Guadalajara, tore up the papers I had and said I didn't have any, called my wife and told her I had lead poisoning, and we flew to Los Angeles, and she picked me up and took me to Wilmington to a hospital where I knew a doctor, and he worked on me. What was the last marijuana done? The DC-3, that's the big airplane. So I went to Colombia in 1981, and I was looking, and I hauled a load or two of marijuana out of there, but it wasn't worth the effort. I was down over guerrilla territory, and the man that had me hooked up took me too far. I couldn't make it back, so we had to go to a staging place and wait. The guerrilla says, you come here just at dark. Come here at dark. You can't come here in the daytime. We have military planes flying this area. We went back 400 miles and parked at the ranch where we had staged and fueled up. And I was laying under a tree in a hammock. And boy, 2 jets came down the runway just tearing it up with machine guns. The jet swarmed a couple of times, and I got in there and fired it up and I took off without even warming it up at all. And so the jets got under me and looked like tracers coming up, and 20 millimeter cannon, boom, boom, boom. And they shot the wing up, and they come back from machine gun and tail. I had like 10 or 12 barrels of 130 octane fuel inside the plane with me. And the thing, if one of those tracers would have hit that, we'd have just went up in a fireball. I couldn't go very fast because I couldn't get the wheels up. So I put it down in a pasture straight ahead. And the wings buckled on me. They buckled, and the fuel caps flew off. I took off, and they kept the 2 jets. And finally, one of them went off. And I thought, I got to get away from these fellers. So I went into a thunderstorm upside of a mountain. And every time I'd come out from that lightning and thunder in there was that jet out there with his boom, boom, boom. I go right back into it. So I went back into it, put it up on this wing, and did a spiral, went down, and got out from under it, got away from the jet. And I thought, all right, we need somewhere to set this thing down. My adrenaline's up, and I feel bulletproof. And I said, all right, let's make a runway here. The grass is 4 or 5 feet high, and I just make it half a mile long and just keep putting the wheels down until it looked like a pretty good runway. Those tires, I think, weighs 30,000 pounds. They were breaking through the crust, and it was soup underneath. So I just put full throttle, and it wasn't enough. That big airplane just come and stood right on its head. It was 90 degrees up, and then the nose of it just crushed in towards us, and we fell in between the seats, and it stopped as the engines held it up. And I had the map, so I knew about 15 or 20 miles away was a little town. So good, we go there, and there was a thatched roof hut. The place looked real nice. We ordered Coca-Colas around, and here comes these guards, a bunch of soldiers with their guns. Who are you? There was no police in that town. This was a military base. So, what an idiot. Well, they locked us in a house and put a guard in front of the door, and he slept the whole night. And I knew he was asleep out there for some way, hearing or something. So I stood on this fella's shoulders, and I took the tile off of the roof, handed it down one piece at a time, quietly. And then we crawled out through the roof and dropped down on the other side, very silently. And I see that there's a boat, a dugout boat there, and a long motor with a long shaft up the side of a house. And just as it got daylight, I went to bang on the door of the house with a man with a motor. And I told him, I don't know, give him money. So we broke down our boat down the river. So hurriedly, we put the motor on the boat and sped off down the river. So middle of the morning, he says, I can't go any further. Where are you? Where's your boat? And we told him, mister, you've got to go. We can't go back. So we took him all day long we got almost to San Jose Guaviare, run some rapids, and then we got out, and I gave him a lot of money and told him to go home. We got away that way. So that's a kind of escape too. It was an escape. I went to prison in 1982, taking a load of money down to the Grand Cayman Islands. And when I flew back in, I was arrested in Miami. And it wasn't for anything to do with cocaine. It was all for an old marijuana charge. So I did 2 years in prison for the marijuana and had 30 years of parole and probation, left hanging, gave up my home and property. Shortly after I got out of prison, I might have been out 3 or 4 days, and I'd heard a Barry SEAL had turned informant. I don't know how I heard it, but just a whisper. Maybe he had. So the phone rang. Barry's voice was there, and he said, "I'm coming out tonight." Very reluctantly, I showed up at 9 o'clock, and Barry was sitting at the back of the restaurant. There's about 20 people in there, ladies 35, 40 years old with their leather skirts and their leather jackets, and guys with their blue jeans. It didn't look like the crowd to be in that nice restaurant. So he said, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I was facing 3 life sentences. And he said, I've told him everything. I've told him your part. I've told her everything. He put his hands up over his eyes and the tears ran down between his fingers. He said, I'm so sorry, Roger. I just couldn't do it, old boy. I said, these DEA, he said, every one of them. I said, well, bring your head honcho over. Jake Jacobson was his name. Anyhow, we had some Chevys Regal and got a little pie-eyed, and he told me that you're going to need to come down to Miami tomorrow and testify before a federal grand jury. If you don't, and testify the same thing that Barry says, the only place you're going to ever see your family again is in a federal penitentiary visiting room. I guarantee you. And I'm like, get out of here, man. So I went to talk to another lawyer, and he about told me the same thing. Like, you either going to tell them everything you've ever done and your mama and everybody else, or are you going to go to prison for life? So I went to the courthouse. I believe it's 3 o'clock. I was supposed to meet Barry and to go into court. I said, Barry, I just can't do it, but they're going to kill you, friend. And he said, oh, they won't, Barry. For sure they're going to kill you. So I gave him a big hug. I believe I even kissed him. I said, goodbye, Barry. They're going to kiss you. So I took Mari and the children, and we fled to Brazil. And we'd been down there about 6 months when I was chasing this $3.5 million that they owed me. The Ochoa owed me. And I called the fella, and he says, oh, I got good news, good news, good news. All our troubles are over. Barry Seals was assassinated last night. So yes, all the cocaine charges were dropped. So now I'm safe. But I've got 30 years of parole left in the United States, and I know they're going to burn me for it if I ever go back there, because what they didn't get me with the Barry Seals case. Mallorca, Spain. It was famous for marijuana and hashish. So we went down and went to Mallorca and met Howard Marks. I thought I had found the man I needed. He knew people in Thailand and Pakistan, and so I started putting up money to haul hashish. And we hauled another load out of Thailand, and 20 tons. And Howard put us up with unloaders in Canada, and $7 million to unload us. And we took that to British Columbia, and it was being sold for, I believe, $1,400 a pound. So guys in Canada says, well, we can sell it. You don't need to take it down. We can sell it for more a year. So they were selling it and bringing my friend Jerry and Ron $2 million and $3 million and $5 million. Well, when the other boat came in, they were all arrested. The Mounties were watching them. So they kicked in my friend Jerry's door, and here's $2 million in the room, $3 million in the car. Hey, they got a little key with a tag on it with the storage place number on it. They was $5 or $6 million there. So all of it was just gone. So it didn't make anything. You don't make any money fooling with Howard Marks. He then used to pay me $2 million, and he just promptly turned me in straight out. Instead of paying me, you go to jail. And that's why I was arrested in Spain. And Howard ripped me off all of those and turned me in so he wouldn't have to pay. So that's what I got for my dealings with that man. I was arrested in July of '88. They had me handcuffed like this, my hands over my back so I couldn't get to getting to the handcuffs, 2 leg irons on me. But to go into the courtroom, they had to take all that off and put the handcuffs in front of me. And I thought, oh boy. And I looked around, and I had a lawyer there, Vascones, and I looked out, and I couldn't see any palm trees or any power lines. I just said, how far is it down? He said, it's so far you'll kill yourself. And I said, well, I'm a dead man anyway. I got 30 years in America. I'm wanted in Germany for something ridiculous. I'd hired a German citizen as a captain of the boat that hauled the hashish. So he told. So now I'm wanted in Germany for hiring a German citizen in an international crime. There's a stenographer over there by the window, and she was filing her nails, waiting on the judge to come, and the courtroom was completely full. When 2 of those fellows went to smoke for some reason and had 2 of them on me, I ran and jumped on her big desk, was big as a piano, and kicked that window out. I was on the 3rd floor, and I looked down. Am I really going to do it? And I thought, I may kill myself. It was 31 feet down, or 11 meters, it said. And I thought, well, I'm facing life. Ain't no telling if I'll ever get out here. I'm almost a dead man anyway. So I jumped, and I hit the top of a car that was parked on the sidewalk. It was a station wagon, and the roof of that car went all the way to the drive shaft. It looked like snow going up when the windows shattered, and the windshield popped over 3 or 4 cars. And I got out and got away. And I got out of there like Donald Duck. I could see a tweet, 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 and ran down the street and got away. The next day, this El Spectador magazine said, Spider-Man escapes. So wasn't long there, a policeman, I was still running, and he come with his police car backwards, and a young policeman got out with a shotgun and came and ran me down and hit me in the back. I still got a dead spot there that itches when it gets hot. They arrested me, and I was there in a Spanish prison. They kept me at night with no clothes on, so I couldn't escape. So that was kind of funny. But they took me to Germany in a military airplane and put me in prison there, and I got 8 years there. And then the United States was asking for me, and I had about 30 years waiting on me here. Then they was going to extradite me to the United States. So I escaped from Lubeck Penitentiary. Now in Germany, when you went somewhere with them or moved with them, they put the handcuffs on you, and one of them's got the Luger, and the other one's got the clip, and they show you the Luger, and they show you the bullets, and say, we will shoot you, mister, and we go shoot you in the back if you get away. So that's the way they handled it. I called the lawyer and told him, I said, I'll give you $10,000 if you would get that cross street down there Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. And he says, you can't get out of there. I believe everybody's ever got out of there. And I said, if I'm not there, you will get $10,000. And if I'm there, you will get $10,000. He said, they may kill you. And I said, then you won't get the $10,000. So he said, that's a mighty big bet on your part. I said, well, if you take it, he said, yes. And not before I was going to do it. It was only 2 days. I was planning 2 or 3 days. I still saw those big brass bullets going in my back. I thought maybe I would be shot and killed, and I really did. I mean, I knew there was a good chance of it. I did a daring escape, jumped on top of a guard tower, cut through the bars, and almost died going through the bars. Took the skin all off my chest, and it was a terrible mess. Out over the fence and got all cut up and went across the place, and then I'm waiting to see about the lawyer. I can't go to him. Then I saw the lawyer coming down the road in his car, a blue Combi, and I yelled, hey, and he stopped, and I got in, and it scared him so bad. He couldn't light a cigarette. I said, go, 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 and the windows was all fogged up. And he stopped at the gas station, and I called my wife and told her I'd escaped, and she told me to go back. She was so upset. So that was quite a journey from there to Holland to get away from the German prison. I got to Holland, I guess, and I called the number for his wife, and her named Elizabeth, and she just cried and begged me to go back. And I said, lady, I am so sorry. Your husband's looking at a month or 3 days or something for giving me a ride. I'm looking at nearly a life sentence, 30 years. I just can't. And she cried, and I said, I'm so sorry. And I really was. I sent her the $10,000. And they didn't give him any time. They gave probation, and he lost his lawyer license. And he told me that he didn't even want to be a lawyer. He was a professor before. That I feel really bad about. But I mean, it's like gambling for $10,000. He took his chance. And I'm really, really sorry if that he did. singing, and we chugged all night and got down to Portugal. And I waited a week there and then got a flight to Venezuela and then flight over and then a bus to the Colombian border. I got back down to Colombia. 2001, I believe. The guy asked would I take a load to Australia. I bought an offshore supply vessel like from Exxon. It's the one that goes out into the oil wells. And that thing was pristine. But when they get 40 years old, they have to sell them. We used to buy them almost for the price of scrap. So I bought that one and took off around the world with it. And we went to Africa and reloaded it. And then I went back out and met an old tuna boat. They threw a ton on it. And we went on to Australia with it around the Cape of Good Horn, way down below and right in the Southern Ocean. And boy, some waves that was just scare you to look behind you. It looked like mountains. I came ashore and sunk the ship and come ashore in rubber boats and was knocked into that there and buried the stuff in the sand. And then we're surrounded by federal police and the military, and they knocked me in the head with a rifle and handcuffed me and took me to prison and put me in life. I was betrayed completely. The people sent me off on a deal, and they had a informant that was waiting for me. Federal police all over the place. It was 1,000 kilos of pure cocaine, and the Colombians never said sorry, never said a word, never helped my family, never helped me with it. But the Colombians, they paid $200,000 for their lawyers. Yeah, I'm really betrayed. So the newspapers was full of it. $400 million worth of cocaine, largest bust ever in Australia. And what had happened is they had found out about my other escapes from when they got my records. So they put me in this terrible place. It looked like you see the movie The Silence of the Lambs. It was a place just exactly like that, where they looked at you with one-way mirrors. So I got 25 years, and I had to do 14 years before I could apply for parole. I hadn't been in long, and I was called to the warden, the director's office, and he made me a cup of tea, sat down there and wall and stuff, and he said, "Now, Mr. Reaves said, I want to just tell you, we're not here to punish you. We are here to keep you. When the judge gave you this sentence, that's your punishment. It's not for us to punish you. If you behave yourself, you will have a good life here." And I thought, wow, I got this time in America, all that parole, got a life sentence here. I may never, ever get out of this place. I don't usually get upset, but that a life sentence for that just upset me. So I thought, I should tell some of these stories. I should write them down for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, posterity, people that never known that. While I was in Australia, I wrote a book and called Smuggler. Mr. Jimmy Carter, wonderful president, a great man, was a neighbor of mine. He wrote a letter on the President of the United States stationery and asked the Attorney General if he would consider me for parole. And it got it started, and I got back home. I was deported from Australia and on July the 27th, 2020. And I was arrested when I came here for parole violations, where I was down there, Terminal Island, California. So I stayed there 9 months in isolation for no charge, no nothing, just nothing. Never saw a parole officer, nothing. And then I was released April the 26th the following year, after being 9 months in solitary confinement. If I had a chance to do my life over again, I most definitely would not do this. I'd have studied my lesson and done something. And some people say they don't want their children to play with my children because their dad is a drug dealer. You talk to people and it's like you got leprosy. Mari held her head up and raised those children, and they all doing really well. So she's the star of this show, and really and truly. Yeah, my mother, brothers and sisters, everybody was affected by it. Can you imagine spending 33 years in prison in cages, being beaten, treated bad, and your wife and children home alone and without you, and crying and visiting you in terrible penitentiaries? No, it's just unthinkable. You wouldn't do it if you knew what was going to happen to you.
Hi, I'm a producer and authorised account. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and comment with more topics that you'd like us to cover in this series.